Hey friends, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic. What if Naruto was trained by Shinigami instead of Jiraiya and got powerful harem with Kushina? P2. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Kushina watched Naruto pant and huff his frustration as he rested on the ground. Naruto had been training with his mother in Kenjutsu for the past 3 hours and his mother was brutal. She really didn't know how to hold back at all. Naruto couldn't even get one chance at her, but how could he? She was a former Kenjutsu legend and she was too fast to see. At times Naruto lost the sight of her altogether and Kushina would joke that she would have already killed him at least 1,000 times already. Naruto pouted at his mother, but he knew it to be true. He just couldn't match up to his mother, but that didn't mean he would give up. He would beat her at her own game and she would drop her jaw when she saw what he could do. Currently the redhead and the blonde were still in the training field with Naruto panting and staring at his mother's form over him. She had that arrogant smirk on her face which made the blonde pout. Well Naru-kun, your Kenjutsu is horrible and your taijutsu, well moving along with that, Kushina said and Naruto's eyebrow twitched. He really would make his mother eat those words. Maybe not today, maybe not in a year, but he would make her pay someday. It's not my fault. I've never held a katana before in my life and I tried to make my own taijutsu, but Kakashi-sensei never really taught me that, Naruto said and Kushina raised an eyebrow. She remembered Kakashi. How could she not? The white-haired boy spent almost all his time with Minato. She figured it was purely out of simple respect and admiration. Kakashi didn't teach you anything. He told me that he'd be more than thrilled to teach you when I had you, Kushina said and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Sounds like people told him and his mother a lot of things. He's been training Sasuke the whole time. He never really trained me except in tree walking, Naruto said and Kushina's red hair covered her eyes. Naruto saw her clench her hands into fists and giggled making Naruto gulp. Is that so? Kushina said and looked at the sky. Naruto didn't know what his mother was thinking, but it must have been downright evil. Run Kakashi-sensei, Naruto yelled and back in Konoha, said Jonin sneezed and a shiver ran down his spine before he felt the urge to count down the rest of his life before something happened. Meanwhile, Kushina decided to help her son up to his feet and rested him against the tree for shade. Well Naruto-kun, we have more than enough time to straighten you out. Tell me what you can do and I'll help you improve on it, Kushina said and Naruto nodded. He went over all of his abilities and told her about the Kage Bunshin technique and his completion of the Rasengan. Kushina smiled at everything. Leave it to her son to have two powerful techniques at his disposal. Naruto had variations of the Kage Bunshin, but other than that those two techniques were all he had currently. He of course told her about the summoning contract with the toads and the Shinigami which made Kushina stiffen, but she seemed to forget about it. When Naruto was done Kushina crossed her arms and smiled. You're just like me Naru-kun, Kushina said and Naruto wondered what she meant by that. Kushina giggled and elaborated for Naruto. What I mean is that you learn from doing something. I was never one for books. I hated the things, but you give me something to do physically then I got it down in no time at all. That's how we'll teach you Naruto. Remember I told you that I would teach you my taijutsu and kenjutsu. Jiraiya will work on your chakra control and I'll watch him when he does. He told me about these 2 years you have to train and we'll make every one of those days count, Kushina said and Naruto nodded with a look of sheer determination. Naruto stood to his feet and raised his fist to his mother. I'll do it Ka-san. I'll make you proud and I'll stun Konoha with my amazing skills, Naruto said and Kushina nodded. He really was her son after all. Kushina stood to her feet and patted her son's head. Alright then get out to the field Naru-kun. We'll work on your taijutsu first, Kushina said and Naruto nodded. They both walked for a bit and Kushina turned to him. Alright, from what I observed of your taijutsu. You need a whole new style. It left too many openings and far too many chances for counters. Luckily for you I invented my own which is in reference to my name which is called Habanero Heat. It relies on the fast and swift movements of your limbs. It's more of anticipating your opponent's reaction and deadly a mixture of speed and strength. The hardest part of this taijutsu is to find the equal parts of both strength and speed. You only have a split second to build up that power, but I found the way to do it. You'll get it down too probably faster than me, Kushina said with a giggle. Naruto's eyes gleamed and Kushina smiled as she took out a scroll and unsealed 2 pieces of paper. Naruto stared at them intently and turned to his mother. Kushina picked up the 2 pieces of paper and slapped one on Naruto's arm. She then slapped the other on his left leg and channeled chakra into each of them. As soon as she did, Naruto slammed into the ground like he felt Gamabunta was sitting on him. Ka-san, this is heavy, Naruto struggled to say and Kushina nodded. She really didn't want to see her son struggle, but she knew it would him in the long run. These are training weights that I made. I am a pretty good seal master if I do say so myself. Right now, you don't have the required speed to do my taijutsu or my kenjutsu. When you reach an appropriate speed, the color of the paper will change. Right now it's white and the appropriate speed is navy blue, Kushina said, and Naruto widened his eyes. He was supposed to move like this until his seals change color. Ka-san, this is evil, Naruto said, and Kushina chuckled. You said you wouldn't complain, Naru-kun, Kushina said, and Naruto sighed. He merely nodded and strained his body to get up. Kushina watched the blonde get up and it amazed her that Naruto was already on his feet. When she tried it for the first time, she couldn't even get up for about half an hour, but Naruto was already up. The sight only served to make Kushina smile at her son more. Well, for now, we'll have your body get accustomed to wearing those seals for the days. You won't be completely adjusted to the seals for a few days or even weeks, but it'll serve to make you stronger, Kushina said and walked off. Naruto watched his mother leave and he gasped. She really wanted to kill him, but Naruto didn't let that get him down. He tried to look at the positive. He would be wicked strong when this was all over and he would have his mother to thank for it. Not to mention that Shin wanted to turn him into a human Shinigami. He wondered what kind of techniques he would be learning, but first he had to walk back to his room. Well, brat, you've gotten into a weird situation, Kyuubi chuckled and Naruto sighed. He knew he was going to hear his tenant sometime and he knew that Kyuubi was gonna laugh at him. It's not funny. Man, this is hard, Naruto said as he trudged through the plains back to the town where they were staying. Each step was like moving a damn boulder with his body. Forward and march, kit. Hup. 2, 3, 4. Hup. 2, 3, 4, Kyuubi said, sounding like a drill sergeant, smiling all the way as he talked. Naruto grunted his pain. He would give anything to get this heaviness off of him. As the blonde walked, he came up to the site where his mother had kicked his ass all those times. He saw his sword still on the ground and the blonde narrowed his eyes. He quickly reached for his sword and tried to get it off the ground, but the combined weight of the seals and the sword made it even harder for Naruto to pick up. Naruto steeled his nerves and pulled with all his might and finally he managed to bring his sword to his hands. Naruto looked at the sword and the blonde sighed. The hardest part is to find the equal parts to both strength and speed. Naruto remembered his mother's words and narrowed his eyes. If he was going to adjust it to the seals, then he would have to do it now. He came on this training trip to do just that, train, and he was going to. Naruto crossed his fingers and the fire burned in his eyes. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto yelled and made 10 clones. The blonde took his sword into his hands and struggled to raise it, but when he did, he turned to all his clones and waved his hands. Bring it on, Naruto said, and all his clones charged at him. He wouldn't lose to Sasuke, he wouldn't be considered the Dobi anymore. He would change and he would show them all the new him. Nighttime. Jiraiya and Kushina were currently inside the hotel when Naruto came through the door. The two had waited for him all day and Kushina began to worry if she overdid it with the seals, but they were both relieved and worried when they saw him. Naruto's face was covered in bruises and his clothes were in tears. He really looked like he had seen better days. Kushina and Jiraiya wondered what he had been doing and Naruto smiled. Ka-san, we're gonna be training tomorrow, so get ready, Naruto said and immediately dropped to the floor. Jiraiya turned to Kushina and chuckled while he held his stomach. He's always been the impatient type. You were the same way, you know, Jiraiya said, and Kushina lightly pouted at Jiraiya being mean. The sage sighed and picked up Naruto, then placed him on the bed. The blonde was knocked out cold if his snoring was anything to go by. He must have been training with his clones. No wonder he's so beat up, Jiraiya said, and Kushina widened her eyes. She might have slightly underestimated her son's resolve. Kushina walked up to him and ruffled his hair while her finger traced his jawline. Kushina giggled as she watched her son twitch to her movements, but then decided to stop. She ran her fingers over his whisker marks and smiled again. She just couldn't stop smiling now that she was with her son. Naruto muttered something and shifted on the bed and unintentionally grabbed Kushina's hand. The redhead smiled and turned to see Jiraiya going to sleep also. Kushina turned out the light and got into the bed with her son. This made her giggle only because she never figured at her age she would still be sharing a bed with her son, but seeing the circumstances she could understand, and she would rather be with her son than Jiraiya not knowing what the perv would try on her. Kushina kissed her son's cheek and closed her eyes, allowing the sleep to claim her. She'd never been so peaceful in her life. 1 week later, Naruto was back in the training field with Kushina going over his taijutsu. Naruto told her about his training with clones and that trying to get adjusted to the seals would take too long and he didn't want any time to get lost on this trip. Kushina nodded in understanding and went a little ahead of the schedule that she planned for herself and Naruto. Naruto had gotten somewhat used to the seals on his body. He could at least walk for the most part and slightly run, but it still had his problems, as Kushina said he would. Currently, Naruto was doing his stretches with Kushina as they got prepared for another day. Kushina told Naruto that his speed would also increase if he was more flexible, so she was helping him with that. Naruto was doing the stretch where his legs were spread out while he sat on the ground and stretched forward while Kushina pushed him lower with her hand. "Ka-san, you're killing me," Naruto said, and Kushina giggled. "No complaining, Naru-kun," Kushina said as she pushed him lower to the ground. Naruto gritted his teeth at the pain he was feeling and he heard his bones snap multiple times. "So, what are we working on now?" Naruto asked, trying to grit his teeth through the entire stretch. "Well, after your warm-up I'm going to tack you the correct posture for holding your sword, then after that I'll show you a few movements to my taijutsu. You might not get it right away, but I've got the perfect method with which to show you," Kushina said, and Naruto nodded with a smile, but not before he screamed as he felt his back give way to the pain he was feeling. After his warm-up, Naruto sat on the ground and watched his mother stand in front of him. Kushina smiled as she wanted her son to pay close attention. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Kushina thought, and immediately a clone appeared next to her, making Naruto widen his eyes. Kushina smiled at his shocked face while Naruto sputtered nonsense like he was trying to confirm what he just say. "Ka-san, how did you do that? You just did my technique with no hand signs," Naruto said with his eyes completely focused on his mother. Kushina chuckled and rubbed the back of her head in embarrassment. "Well, Naru-kun, let's just say that I have a perfect control over it," Kushina said, and Naruto's eyes widened again. If he could learn that, then he could surprise so many people that he'd have enough time to do other things. He had to get his mother to teach him how to do that. "Alright, Naru-kun, time to focus on taijutsu. I want you to watch me and my clone perfectly. Never take your eyes off us," Kushina said, and Naruto nodded. The two redheads squared off and Kushina nodded. The clone grinned and charged at her, then let out a punch, but Kushina saw it coming, and with a speed that made Naruto gasp she ducked under it and slammed her fist into the clone's stomach. The clone coughed, but didn't dispel, which was the first thing Naruto noticed. However, the clone was quick on the rebound and grabbed Kushina's hand, then flung her over its shoulder. Kushina gritted her teeth, and with a beautiful turn, she landed on her feet and pivoted her foot to aim at the clone's chest. Her hit connected and Kushina sent the clone flying into the tree, making it dispel. She brushed a hand through her hair and turned back to Naruto. "It's countering at its best, Naruto-kun. Baiting the opponent, and when you have them, you unleash all your power, speed and strength to cause them pain. It's all internal, but it hurts like hell, Databane," Kushina said, and Naruto nodded that he understood. "Alright, you try it. Remember that the object is to anticipate, then react and finally counter at full force," Kushina said, and Naruto nodded. He crossed his fingers and yelled. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," Naruto yelled, making one clone. Both stood away from the other and cracked their knuckles. Kushina gave them the signal to begin. The two Narutos ran at each other and began their spar. Kushina sighed as she saw Naruto's form. He wasn't countering like she was. His countering was slower and his chakra control was shot. One hit to his clone and it was gone. She'd have to get him on Kenjutsu and chakra control before Taijutsu or they wouldn't be getting anything done. Naruto seemed to sense his mother's slight frustration and sighed. He wondered if this was really his preferred style of fighting and was about to apologize to her, but Kushina patted his shoulder. Keep trying it, Naru-kun. It's not going to be easy, but here we go, Kushina said as she walked in front of Naruto. The blonde raised an eyebrow and Kushina smiled. Hit me, she said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Kushina pointed to her face and said, hit me, come on Naru-kun, she said to him. Naruto narrowed his eyes and wondered if this was alright, but sighed and let out a punch. Kushina's smile turned into a smirk as she grabbed Naruto's hand and kicked him in the stomach, making the blonde skid back and hit the floor. Come on Naruto-kun, hit me, if you don't then you're not getting dinner, Kushina said, and Naruto gasped. He wouldn't get dinner. Kushina sighed and rushed at Naruto, then punched him in the face. You're not gonna let your mother kick you all over the place, are you? Kushina asked, and Naruto gritted his teeth as he stood up from the ground. Kushina appeared behind him and kicked him across the field. She didn't like this, but felt like she knew Naruto's thoughts. It was like saying, if I experience it then I will learn how to do it. That's what Kushina thought anyway. Naruto coughed and held his stomach in pain. The blonde cursed under his breath. He didn't want to hurt his mother, but her punches and kicks were bone-shattering. Naruto huffed and got to his feet as Kushina appeared in front of him. She let out a punch and Naruto's eyes burned. He quickly sidestepped Kushina despite the heavy seals on his body, making Kushina widen her eyes. She smirked and nodded. I knew I was right, Kushina said, and ran back at Naruto. The blonde struggled to stand, but he clearly saw his mother's hit. After a week of getting hit all the time and the pain that came with it, Naruto was more than able to try and counter it. All he had to do was know that he could. Kushina let out a kick and Naruto jumped over it. His body was heavy. It was weighing him down and making his breathing hitch even more, but he was known for his stamina and he'd be damned if he didn't try anymore because of a little setback. The blonde quickly backflipped away and Kushina smiled. Naruto's stretches were making him more flexible. He was getting more and more into it. It was all too fast. His mind didn't have the time to think about anything, but Naruto was moving on instinct. The feeling of getting hit, the pain that came with it, the bitter memories of getting hit by Sakura. They were all fueling his senses at the moment. Naruto breathed easily for a second, but blocked a punch to the gut and tried to slam his foot into Kushina's side, but the redhead wouldn't have that and blocked it easily. She was impressed. Naruto had the countering now. He had been working on it all week, but he got it. Kushina just found the perfect method for training her son. Unknown to either of them, the Shinigami was watching and a small grin appeared on his face. He'll make a great human Shinigami when I'm through with him, Shin said and continued to watch. Naruto gritted his teeth and gasped. He backed away from Kushina as his mother tended to her side. Naruto had at least one hit on his mother. Kushina winced slightly, but smiled as she stopped her movements. You did it, Naruto-kun. Even if it was just a scratch, you did it, Kushina said, and Naruto smiled. He huffed and fell to the ground, well, almost. As he fell, he landed into Kushina's arms, making the woman smile. She pulled up his sleeve and looked at his seal. Sure enough, it changed from white to yellow. Kushina grinned and hugged her son. That's my son Databane, Kushina said as she and Naruto rested in the field. Jiraiya chuckled at the sight he had been observing. He would teach Naruto how to improve the Rasengan and control some of Kyuubi's chakra, but Kushina was probably the best teacher that Naruto could ever ask for. 2 weeks later, Naruto, Kushina and Jiraiya were currently in Hot Springs country, just traveling for the moment. They were looking for a short break from their walking and training. Naruto had gotten into further depth of the habanero heat taijutsu style from his mother and he had the aches and pains to prove it. He had gotten countering down, so now he was working on the next step to her taijutsu. He still had his flaws, but slowly and surely Kushina was literally beating it out of him. Jiraiya had told Naruto a bit about fuinjutsu since the blonde was developing an interest into the art. When the sage told him that it was the hardest study out of all the shinobi arts, Naruto just replied stating that he didn't care and he'd have it down, making Kushina and Jiraiya chuckle. Kushina had also told Naruto about her unique chakra ability, which consisted of chakra chains, which she demonstrated about a few days ago. Naruto had asked her if he could do it too since he was her son, but Kushina said that she wasn't sure. However, things weren't all that bad as Naruto stared to show the early signs of success with the seals that Kushina used on him. He still had them on, but his body was slightly lighter and he could run normally as he always did. He could do his standard exercises with them on and he could counter most of Kushina's attacks, when she wasn't full-blown serious. In the meantime, Naruto had spoken to the Shinigami about a week ago and agreed that he would like to be the full summoner to him and have his complete training in the arts of the Shinigami. Naruto still had the scar on his upper chest from the encounter. Naruto snapped out of his stupor when he realized that they stopped walking. He looked up and raised an eyebrow when he saw them stop in front of a shinobi store. The blonde raised an eyebrow and turned to Jiraiya like he had expected better. "I'm being trained here?" Naruto asked and Jiraiya sighed. Kushina giggled while Jiraiya shook his head. "Of course not. Give me some credit here. We're going to be doing missions. This is one of the contacts to Konoha that handle missions for people like me," Jiraiya said, and Naruto crossed his arms and tried to wonder what the hell Jiraiya was talking about. Even Kushina was confused with that one and Jiraiya sighed. "I'm surrounded by idiots," Jiraiya thought to himself and turned to the Uzumaki duo. "You both know I'm not in Konoha the whole time, but I still take missions. It's because of outposts like this. I receive a mission to this location every 2 weeks to a month and I submit my reports here. Sarutobi-sensei would give me my pay and it would be added to my mission record," Jiraiya explained, making Kushina and Naruto nod that they understood. Kushina didn't know because such a system wasn't around when Minato was the Hokage. Naruto had no idea since he didn't know what it was like to be an S-rank shinobi, but he would one day. "So we're here for a mission?" Naruto asked and Jiraiya nodded. Naruto gulped since he was shaky with his fighting. He could run, walk, use chakra to a certain degree, but fighting was kind of different. He doubted he could even take on Sasuke with this much weight holding him down. He was probably lucky he was walking and running, let alone training, but that's how he did things. "So what are we going to do? Fight bandits?" Naruto asked and Kushina turned to Jiraiya. The sage sighed and rubbed the back of his head. "I haven't checked yet. Remember, she won't give me anything over the top if you're with me. I haven't even told her that Kushina is alive because of you." "I can only imagine her surprise," Jiraiya said, and Naruto turned to his mother who was smiling, but he wasn't looking at that. He was shuddering because he was looking at her eyes. Her eyes aren't smiling. They're not smiling. She's not happy. Naruto yelled out mentally while Kushina thought over her meeting with Tsunade and how it would go. "Well, that aside, let's go inside. It'll give us the chance to test your skills and see where you still need improvement," Jiraiya said, and Naruto gulped. He didn't really have anything to go on. His mother taught him her taijutsu for the few weeks and she taught him a few katas for his sword, which he had gone quite a ways with the Kage Bunshin technique since his mother told him the secret to it and why it was considered a B-ranked jutsu. Whatever the clone learns and does then dispels, then the user will learn it also. That's why it was great for stealth missions and infiltration missions. Ever since then, he had used his clones to learn how to use his sword to at least genin level and train his taijutsu to mid-chunin. He had a lot of pain and suffering from it all, but it was all in the interest of training. "Alright, let's go. I hope we get something good," Naruto said as he followed Jiraiya and Kushina followed Naruto inside. They came to see an old man behind a desk. Naruto and Kushina took the chance to observe the inside of the shop. It was filled to the brim with all the latest weapons and outfits from Konoha. It was then that Kushina took the chance to get some things since she hadn't really gone shopping. Kushina tapped Jiraiya's shoulder and smiled. Jiraiya groaned and gave her his wallet, and the woman went on a spree as she picked out several weapons, outfits, and tools for herself. Jiraiya tried not to cry while Naruto chuckled at the sight. Finally, all those times Jiraiya took his money were coming right back at him. "Karma is awesome, Datbeo," Naruto yelled out mentally, making Kyuubi nod even though he couldn't see it. "Even though it can be a bitch at times," Kyuubi said, and Naruto nodded in agreement. He could attest to that, and so could Kyuubi. Jiraiya simply watched as Kushina bought more tools and clothes until she brought them up to the counter. "Ring this up please," Kushina said with a grin, and the man turned to Jiraiya and the sage sighed and nodded. He rung up the price and Kushina paid for it all and gave the wallet back to Jiraiya and give him her thanks. Naruto and Kyuubi continued to grin at Jiraiya's expense while Kushina sealed all of her clothes and new tools into some of the scrolls she bought in the last town they went to. They sold some high-quality scrolls and even some high-quality ink. Kushina was really ecstatic about it, but Naruto wasn't sure why. Maybe it was just her thing, but that was beside the point. Jiraiya walked up to the counter and flashed his papers to the old man. The man nodded and pulled out a scroll and handed it to Jiraiya. The Sannin nodded and walked out of the place with Kushina and Naruto following him. When they were out of the shop, Jiraiya pulled out the scroll and opened it. "So what do we have?" Naruto asked. Jiraiya hushed him and looked it over, closed it with a grin. "We're in luck. We have a B rank mission," Jiraiya said, and Naruto's eyes gleamed. Kushina grinned at her son's enthusiasm and listened as Jiraiya explained. "Basically, we need to go to country and help protect their daimyo's treasury from thieves. His elite guards aren't capable of handling the bandits since these guys are ex-shinobi. Tsunade says it's a B rank because there is the possibility of an A- rank missing nin in the group. Nothing too hard, I suppose," Jiraiya said before seeing Kushina and Naruto grinning with excitement. He had to sweat drop when he realized just who he was talking to. "I can't wait for this," Naruto yelled out, and Kushina grinned. "I'm gonna have some fun today, Databane," Kushina said, and the Uzumaki duo were already ready to go. Jiraiya sighed as he brought them out of their celebration. "I don't know if you two realize, but T-Country is at least 3 to 4 days away. Not to mention that the sun is going down, so we should head out tomorrow," Jiraiya said, making Kushina and Naruto pout. "We'll get a motel for the night, then we'll leave first thing in the morning," Jiraiya said and walked off. Kushina and Naruto sighed as they followed Jiraiya towards their motel for the night. Nighttime. Naruto sighed as he looked up at the ceiling in his bedroom. He still thought about his interaction with Shin that week ago, and it unnerved him to not know what happened to his sword. It was the same when Kushina had taught him the right stance to begin with and even the right posture. He had used the sword in small practice matches with Kushina and his clones, so he was getting the natural feel for it. It made him happy that he was progressing, but he knew he still had much to learn. Then there were the responsibilities that Shin said Naruto would have, but he said that Naruto wouldn't be trained until Shin felt he was sure of Naruto, so the blonde merely dealt with it for the time being. Naruto shifted in his bed and sighed again. He wasn't sure, but he felt like he was becoming more like Shikamaru with each sigh that escaped from his lips. He turned in his sheets and closed his eyes, but then the door opened. Both Jiraiya and Kushina came through the door, with Jiraiya immediately going to sleep. Kushina straightened her hair and left the room for a second and went into the bathroom. Naruto wasn't sure what she was doing, but he figured she was preparing for bed just like him. He was facing the wall, but he still had a good view of the room out of the corner of his eye, and the sight that Naruto saw surprised him. Kushina came out of the bathroom with a simple t-shirt showing her lovely bras and flat stomach. She was also wearing some red shorts that complemented her hair. Naruto gulped and cursed the fact that no motel ever had a 3-bedroom setting, or none that they could find. His eyes roamed his mother's form for a bit before she was out of his field of vision. He heard her creep into the bed next to him, and Naruto felt the urge for sleep leave him. He was also mentally berating himself. This was his mother for Kami's sake. This was so sick, but the closeness of the two made it hard for Naruto to think of anything else. The smell of her hair invaded his senses, and the movement of her body as she wrapped him in the usual hug was also agonizing. He could feel her mounds against his back and her breath on his neck. This is not good. Why did she have to be my mother? Naruto wondered, and Kyuubi chuckled at his container's problem. This was so funny to watch to the fox spirit. Meanwhile, Naruto just stayed silent and tried to sleep it off. When he revived, his mother had to admit that she was a hot woman. He had remembered her face against the moon in her presence. Naruto sighed and simply forced himself to go to sleep. He'd just have to put up with his mother's closeness for now, but this would be bad if he didn't do something. Next morning, Naruto groaned as they walked along the trail towards Tea Country. He hadn't gotten that much sleep, or rather he did, but he was more tired than when he was last awake. Naruto stared off into the distance and remained quiet for the trip. He wasn't sure what to talk about, or rather he was worried that he was the only one who found the situation to be awkward. Kid, you must be weird to even think what you're thinking, Kyuubi said, and Naruto blushed before he narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? Naruto asked, feigning ignorance, but Kyuubi wouldn't have any of that. Oh no, he would enjoy having fun with his container until it was no longer funny, but Kyuubi wasn't sure that it was ever going to be that way. Don't play dumb with me, Kit. I never thought that you'd be a little mother. Shut up. Right now. Don't you dare complete that sentence. Naruto mentally yelled, and Kyuubi cackled. Oh, this was going to be too much fun for the fox demon. Naruto sighed and cut the connection with Kyuubi and continued walking. Kushina stared at her son for a few minutes, and based on his face, she knew something was wrong with him. He was more tired than usual, he was being very talkative, and he was muttering to himself. She had stared at him for a bit of time and could only wonder what he was thinking. Naru-kun, are you alright? Kushina asked, and Naruto snapped out of his stupor. He turned to his mother, and while it was hard, he managed to force last night down and talk to her. Yeah, Ka-san, I'm fine. Why? Naruto asked, and Kushina simply shrugged her shoulders. For some reason that answer didn't sit well with her, but she decided to let it go for now. Oh, nothing. You're just not being your usual self, she said, and Naruto widened his eyes. Seeing that reaction, Kushina felt like she hit the nail on the head, but waited for Naruto to talk. Oh, I'm just thinking about something. Namely, my contract to Shin, Naruto said, keeping the last part to himself. Kushina nodded and turned her head forward. Naruto sighed and merely kept walking with the two. Jiraiya seemed to notice the interaction between the two, but ignored it. Mother and son situations were best if they were worked out themselves, and he'd rather not do anything that would have Kushina target his wallet again. So Jiraiya just calmly stayed out of it, for now. 4 hours later. Evidently the entire trip had been uneventful. The sun was now high in the sky and it was quite hot for everyone. No one found anything to talk about other than casual conversation, but it was then that Naruto decided to try and break the ice when he wanted to know something interesting. So Ka-san, you never told me. How could you do the Kage Bunshin without hand signs? Naruto asked while Jiraiya's eyebrow twitched, showing that he wanted to know also. Kushina giggled at the sudden question, but knowing her son, she knew it would come sooner or later. So you want to know that? Well, I'll say that I had a knack for it, or better said that the Kage Bunshin complemented my unique chakra. Just like I showed you I had chakra chains, it turned out that my control of the Kage Bunshin wasn't so normal either. At first, like you, I had to cross my fingers and yell, but after a while I was able to do it, by thinking it. The trick is to release your chakra and turn it into what you want. If you want a clone, then think it and think the number. You also have to measure how much chakra to put into the clone to make it more durable. If you want to learn it, then I'll show you, Naru-kun, Kushina said, and Naruto's eyes gleamed before he raised an eyebrow. He hadn't noticed all those weeks, so he had to ask. Why are you calling me Naru-kun? Naruto asked, and Kushina smiled. She wasn't aware of the situation already planted in Naruto's mind and quickly hugged him, making the blonde blush in embarrassment. Because it's cute, Databane, Kushina said, and Naruto gulped. Yep, this really wasn't good, but he'd deal. He always has and always will. Unknown to the three, someone was looking over them and slightly chuckled. 3 days later, Naruto, Kushina, and Jiraiya continued to walk towards Tea Country for their mission, which was to protect the daimyo's treasury from some kind of thieves that were targeting it. Some of the awkwardness that was there at the start of the trip was gone after those 3 days of walking and talking. Naruto had forgotten that incident somewhat, but it was rather hard to do with Kyuubi constantly reminding him. While they traveled, Kushina taught Naruto more of her kenjutsu and taijutsu, and she was more than pleased that the result of the seals on her son's body were working better than she could imagine. As she always knew, Naruto was a fast learner and he had the bruises and aches to prove it, but even in his one day off, the blonde was still learning about chakra control from Jiraiya as the Sannin gave him books to read, which Naruto pouted and Kushina giggled since she shared the same dislike for books just like her son. Currently, They had just arrived in tea country and the sun was going down. Everyone finally sighed and stopped near a restaurant. They saw many people conversing and walking the pretty light-filled streets. Finally here. So when do we meet this daimyo? Naruto asked while he sat on the ground. Jiraiya sighed and took out the mission scroll and looked through its contents. We can meet with him after we get something to eat. Why don't you two get something and I'll set up the hotel? Jiraiya said while Naruto and Kushina turned to each other then gave Jiraiya their individual blank stares. Aren't you gonna be hungry? Kushina asked and Jiraiya grinned as he walked away. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he saw Jiraiya's retreating form and sighed when he heard the man's reply. Oh, don't worry about me. I'll simply meet up with you guys in the next hour, Jiraiya said giggling while he walked away. It was now Kushina's turn to sigh when she remembered that back when she was alive tea country was quite famous for its brothels and knowing Jiraiya that was kind of easy to figure out. Oh well Sochi, let's get something to eat now, Kushina said walking into the restaurant while Naruto got to his feet and followed in after her. The restaurant was rather quaint looking, but they weren't in the mood to be picky. Kushina sat at a table and Naruto sat across from her. Both were given menus and ordered some good-looking food. They were still rather tired so neither was in the mood to eat anything big. Naruto simply ate some soup with a couple of sandwiches while Kushina had the same thing. It was a rather simple dinner and not much conversation was going around, but for different reasons between the mother and son duo. Naruto, no matter how hard he tried, couldn't forget that night when he felt a small attraction to his mother. He knew he was the only one feeling this way, but Kushina if given enough time would pick up some of the hints and that worried Naruto slightly. He looked up from his meal to see Kushina quietly eating her food and he unconsciously examined her again. His eyes looked at her creamy-looking skin of her face and then noticed her long beautiful, red hair. He could really see why his father could fall for such a woman, but what worried him was that just maybe he was starting to also. He had always thought that he liked Sakura, but somewhere in the back of his mind he knew he was deluding himself. He remembered how hard Sakura cried when Sasuke had woken up from that coma that Itachi put him in. Naruto sighed when he also remembered the multiple times that Sakura did hit and berate him. He wasn't oblivious to it also. He wasn't sure why he always allowed it, but he felt that maybe Sakura would come around someday. I guess that was a dream also, Naruto thought and sighed before he looked at his mother again. Even though it was soup and some sandwiches Kushina was eating with some grace that made Naruto compare her to Sakura and then the blonde chuckled that it was ridiculous. Mainly because he couldn't compare Sakura to his mother. Sakura lacked all the things that made Kushina look amazing. He could have chalked that up to Sakura still having a childlike body, but he knew that even if she was older she still wouldn't compare to his mother. That long red hair, the creamy skin and the just amazing presence she exuded. Kushina felt her son's eyes on her as she ate and truth be told she was rather embarrassed by it. She wasn't sure why he was looking at her so intently, but she figured that Naruto was still coming to terms that she was alive and in front of him. Kushina mentally smiled when she thought that. She was rather happy also that she could be with him like this. For all those years, she wondered what it was like to be with her son and when Minato wanted to make him a Jinchuriki Kushina felt such unparalleled sadness, but Naruto grew up to be a fine young man in her eyes. Naruto looked so much like Minato that the resemblance was uncanny, but Kushina wouldn't dare compare Naruto to Minato in any other way than appearance. Naruto wasn't Minato, he was Naruto and he was going to stay that way. Kushina decided to break Naruto's gaze and looked up from her food. Is something bothering you Naru-kun? Kushina asked and Naruto quickly stopped his staring and blushed in embarrassment. He had been caught looking at his mother or maybe she knew all along, but didn't say anything to him. Nothing really Ka-san. I'm done with my food so I'm gonna go, Naruto said quickly getting up and left the restaurant. Kushina frowned when she saw Naruto leave. It's like the blonde was avoiding her for some reason. Kushina looked at her son's plate and saw that he still have a few sandwiches left. She looked at her own plate and saw she was just about finished which shows that she was the one relatively eating. Sochi what's wrong with you? Kushina wondered as she placed some money on the table and walked out of the restaurant to meet up with Jiraiya. With Naruto. Naruto sighed as he walked through the streets. He was an idiot. He just ran out of the restaurant so fast before his mother could even respond. Maybe it was on the spur of the moment, he wasn't sure, but he could feel that he just made things a bit more complicated. No kidding, brat. Now she's definitely gonna be suspicious of you now, Kyuubi said, and Naruto sighed with a nod. It's not my fault, Naruto said, and Kyuubi grinned like mad. He was still having so much fun as he toyed with his container. Hey, you were the one checking her out. I'll admit that she's nice looking for a human, even if we have a I hate you, you hate me relationship, Kyuubi said, and Naruto chuckled. He could see that. Kyuubi and Kushina arguing every day about something that didn't even matter. I'm sure I don't want to know, Naruto said, and Kyuubi snorted, then faded. Naruto wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a response or not, but he didn't care at the moment. After a few hours of aimless walking, Naruto came up to a large building and raised an eyebrow. He saw Jiraiya talking to someone and walked over. Ero Sennin, what are you doing? Naruto asked, bringing Jiraiya's attention to him. The Sannin's eyebrow twitched before he smacked Naruto up the head. You damn brat, I told you not to call me that. Jiraiya yelled while Naruto rubbed his head. You don't have to hit me, you damn pervert, Naruto said while Jiraiya sighed and turned back towards the man he was talking to. Sorry about that. Now then, when would you like us to start guarding the treasury? Jiraiya asked, and Naruto turned to the man in formal clothing. He gasped when he realized that Jiraiya was talking to the daimyo of Tea Country. Maybe the big building was his home. The daimyos always were fancy in most things. If at all possible, I would like you to begin tonight. I don't want any of those ninja getting to my stuff. I've already received threats on a constant basis, so I don't need to worry about any more things while I rule this country, the daimyo said, and Jiraiya nodded while Naruto watched the interaction between the two. Sounds like a real problem if they're targeting the daimyo only for his wealth. Maybe he did something, Kushina said, startling Naruto, which made him jump. He quickly turned around to see his mother and her smile, but he felt, or rather could sense, some sadness exuding from her, and he knew it was his fault. Jiraiya seemed to know, but didn't say anything. I haven't done anything. I've only been in office for a few months, the daimyo said, making Kushina sigh. Alright, sorry. I didn't mean anything by it. Just wondering. So Jiraiya, when do we start? Kushina asked, and Jiraiya grinned like mad. Right now. We'll take a look at the interior of the place and we'll plan from there. If they try to come, then we'll capture one person and have him lead us to the others, Jiraiya told them, making Naruto and Kushina nod. Let me show you all inside, the leader of Tea Country said as Jiraiya followed him inside. Kushina was going to walk, but Naruto grabbed her hand, making his mother look at him. Ka-san, listen, I'm sorry I ran out like that. I just wanted to tell you that, Naruto said, and Kushina looked at him for a second. She could see he was really sorry, but he was also keeping something from her. Though she was happy that he was talking to her. The last thing she wanted for the both of them to feel any awkwardness between them. It's alright, Naru-kun. I'm sorry if I did something to make you leave, Kushina said as she sent her son a sincere smile. Naruto nodded with his own foxy grin as they walked inside the building. The sight they were greeted to shocked them. The hallway was so exquisite and beautiful. Imported wood was used for most of it, while chandeliers hung from the ceiling to light up the room. They saw Jiraiya's sandals at the doorstep and took off their shoes also. After a bit of walking and admiring the place, Kushina and Naruto made it to Jiraiya, who was sitting on the couch. Alright, he has left us in charge of the place and went to bed. I told it'd be best if he went somewhere safe, but he said that this was the only place that felt that way, so there was nothing I can do, Jiraiya said, making Kushina and Naruto nod. So what's the plan? Naruto asked, ready to get the ball rolling. Jiraiya nodded and took out a map with the layout of the building. Well, I can hold my own against these guys, so you two will be a pair. From what the daimyo told me, they came at two major points. From the windows and the lower levels of the palace. Apparently his guards can't do anything to stop them, so that's where we come in. I'll stop them at the lower levels if they go down there, while you two guard the windows. Keep your guard up, Jiraiya said and furled up the scroll. Naruto and Kushina nodded while Jiraiya walked away. You know, I feel sorry for anyone who fights you, Ka-san, Naruto said, and Kushina grinned before putting her shoes back on along with Naruto. I suppose, But you better not slack off just because I can back you up, Kushina replied, and Naruto rolled his eyes before nudging his mother's shoulder. Don't look down on me, Ka-san. Besides, I'm no pushover, Naruto said, and Kushina giggled. I suppose not. Well then, Naru-kun, get started. We don't want to let them know we're here, Kushina stated as she turned out the lights. Naruto nodded and took up a hiding spot while he sent clones to the other floors to monitor the windows in those places. 5 hours later, Naruto sighed and rubbed his eyes. It was late and they hadn't seen any instance of activity. He saw Kushina sitting down next to him while she was reading a small book. Naruto glanced at it and saw it was about creating jutsus that went well with kenjutsu. He had asked her earlier why she didn't go off with his clones or in an individual room to be sure no one was inside, and Kushina told him that she was a talented sensor. She could sense even where Jiraiya was, and she would know if someone was going to one of the other places. Say, Kyuubi, can you sense anything? Naruto asked, making Kyuubi yawn while he tiredly opened one of his eyes. Yeah, they're coming. Your mother's sensor abilities reach the next few rooms, but I can tell they're outside. At least 10 are in front of the window. There are 2 where the perv is. You're lucky, kid. The 2 below are A and B ranked people. Anyone coming through the window is C ranked, which you'll be fine with dealing with, or at least you should be, Kyuubi said, turning silent. Naruto sighed and got to his feet, making his mother take her eyes off her book. What's wrong, Naru-chan? Kushina asked, trying out a new name for her son while Naruto grabbed his sword and tightened his grip. Ka-san, get ready for a fight, Dadbao, Naruto said, grinning like mad while Kushina got to her feet. Her son pointed outside and Kushina concentrated her senses on that spot. She widened her eyes when she felt the 10 chakra signatures that Kyuubi felt also. The redhead closed her book and put it away while she took out a kunai. It's been a while since I could do this. Let's see if I still got it, Kushina said to herself while Naruto unsheathed his sword. He felt a weird aura come off it and he looked at the summoning contract on his hand, which glowed slightly before fading. Naruto narrowed his eyes and jumped to the ceiling while Kushina stayed behind a curtain. After another few minutes, the windows opened and the enemy appeared. Naruto narrowed his eyes while he stayed to the ceiling. He had spent time with his mother on his chakra control and he got even better with it. Is everything ready? One of them asked the other. They had crossed out Kiri headbands, so that was obvious for the moment. Yep. Those damn guards got what they deserved. Now let's raid this place, then we burn it like all the others. I don't see why we need those other 8 guys. We're more than enough to handle this, the other said, making the older one narrow his eyes. Stop complaining and get the job done. We have to raid this place before the daimyo wakes up. Who knows who he sent after our last 2 attempts were your fault, he said. Hey, it wasn't my fault. Those damn guards snuck up on me and I had to kill them. Don't blame me, the younger said while the older sighed. Whatever, let's just go now, he said as he reached for the door that was connected to the hallway, but before he could turn the knob, Naruto jumped down and kicked him away into the wall, surprising the 2. You're a little late to be trying anything with us. Now why don't you get lost before I kick your asses, Naruto said, making Kushina smile behind the curtain. She wouldn't come out just yet. She just wanted to see how well Naruto could actually do for now with the seals on. Well, looks like we have a brat trying to be tough. And he's a ninja, how nice. I knew today would be different, one of the bandits said, and Naruto grinned. He might have been feeling weighed down, but that wouldn't affect him for a little while. Naruto took the offensive stance that his mother taught him while the 2 missing nin took out 2 chakra blades. So it's gonna be a sword fight, huh? Well, kid, you're out of luck. We were runner-ups in becoming some of Kiri's swordsmen. Even you should know how good Kiri is with their swords, the 2 Chunin level nin said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. He didn't care about any of that. Besides, he was being trained by an Kenjutsu legend and that was more than enough for him. Well then, why don't you show me how good you are right now? Naruto yelled as he sent chakra to his feet and dashed at them. The younger Chunin blocked Naruto's strike with his blade and tossed a kick at the blonde, and Naruto widened his eyes in a sudden realization. This guy was slow. Too slow. Naruto could dodge so easily. His mother was so much faster and stronger. The blonde ducked under the kick before he sent his sword at the man's side, but he was stopped by the other Chunin nin and narrowed his eyes. Well, at least you can move well, the guy said, and Naruto grinned. He saw his mother watching him from behind the curtain and was going to show her that he would improve. Well, thank you. I have a great sensei, Naruto replied, dug into his pouch and threw a kunai at the older bandit, making the man duck. The blonde then turned and kicked the younger one out the window, making all their allies gasp as he was sent crashing into the ground. What the hell was that? Someone yelled while everyone saw Naruto jump out of the palace. The blonde grinned and turned to the older one. Aren't you going to come at me also? Naruto asked, making the man grit his teeth before he chuckled with a vein in his head. Cheeky bastard, the guy said as his chakra blade glowed blue. This was the finest chakra blade he could get. It would make short work of the blonde idiot's sword. Naruto jumped into the air and threw a flame tag kunai at the man, but he dodged it easily as the kunai embedded itself on the wall. After a few seconds, it exploded, sounding the alarms throughout the palace. Naruto crossed his fingers and yelled, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, the blonde yelled, making 3 clones. Get the daimyo out of the building. I'll handle this, Naruto said to his clones. They nodded and ran off before he heard the 2 others smirk. Kid, your way out of your league. In case you don't know it, but you're surrounded, the man said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes, allowing his hair to cover over them. Not really. It's just you 2 and me. Ka-san can take care of the rest, Naruto said, making the 2 men laugh out loud. Oh, this kid is funny. He still needs his mama to do things for him. To think I almost respected him, the older guy said while the younger laughed. Naruto just kept up his grin as he saw someone sheath their sword. That wasn't any fun at all, Databane, Kushina said as the 2 turned around to see all 8 of their comrades on the ground while the redhead flipped her hair. I should have gone with Jiraiya. Maybe he's having fun right now, Kushina said, making the 2 grit their teeth as Naruto's sword glowed. The blonde raised an eyebrow and the summoning contract on his hand glowed even more, making the blonde shield his eyes. Kushina stared at Naruto's sword and so did the 2 Chunin-level bandits as Naruto closed in on them. His hair covering his eyes. His body wasn't radiating any ki and yet he had the feeling of death all around him. Naruto raised his head, showing his eyes to be slightly silver along the outside of his cerulean eyes. He bit his thumb and traced it over his seal. Kuchio's no jutsu, Naruto said, and he didn't have to turn around. The reactions from the 2 were enough to know they were staring at the Shinigami. What is this kid? The older one said while Shin turned to Naruto. Time for you to learn the first part of being a human Shinigami, Shin said, and Naruto nodded. The blonde dashed forward with his sword, but the 2 guys blocked it before Naruto landed to the ground. He felt so light on his feet right now. It was like his mother's seals weren't even affecting him in the least. Naruto appeared behind the 2 while he slashed his sword forward. The younger brother blocked the blonde's attack, but something was wrong. Their swords were the best and Naruto's sword wasn't supposed to be this good against a Kiri sword. It should have broke long ago. What is that sword made out of? The younger said as he backflipped away from the blonde. He huffed and Naruto's smile widened. It wasn't evil, but it was good. It was the smile of someone just happy to be living. The blonde turned to his surprised mother and grinned. Ka-san, I'm going to keep improving and I'm gonna show you how good I am, Naruto said as he blurred out of sight. He wasn't sure what it was, but Shin was affecting him in some way. Even Kyuubi was up and watching the fight unfold. Naruto appeared behind the younger nin and his sword pierced his stomach. The older shinobi gasped as Naruto twisted the sword through the younger one's body as he separated it. Kushina widened her eyes as she saw a small white humanoid-looking thing next to Naruto. Slice through it, Naruto-sama. This is the first step to being a human Shinigami, Shin said, and Naruto did so. He slashed through the figure and before long it was absorbed into his sword while the man's body dropped to the floor. Naruto's sword glowed even more and the blonde smiled. What did you do? The older nin asked and Naruto was more than happy to reply to him. I sealed his soul into my sword. I see what Shin meant when he said that he wouldn't be using his blade anymore. He sent that energy into my sword and now my sword is the essence of the Shinigami. Or the sword of death, Naruto said, making the man grit his teeth. Damn you to hell, he said as he dashed at Naruto. The blonde brought his sword back and closed his eyes. You're already there, Dadbeo, the blonde said calmly and slashed forward. He opened his eyes to see the soul of the bandit in front of him and grinned. When he was younger, he remembered Sarutobi talking with some Anbu in his office about a certain jutsu involving the Shinigami. Naruto was real good at hiding since he could outrun Anbu even with his Kill Me orange jumpsuit. So Naruto slapped his hands together. I'm new to it, but this might work. Fuinjutsu. Shiki Fujin, Naruto yelled and Shin gave a small smirk. The brat was full of surprises. So you heard of that jutsu? Normally I'd take your soul, but our contract states I can't, so you're free, Shin said as he grabbed the soul of the man and sealed it into the pot, never to be revived again. The area was vacant while Naruto turned to the Shinigami. So are you going to train me now? Naruto asked and the Shinigami looked at the sword in the blonde's hand. That's right. You've passed. I wanted you to use the blade as a rite of passage. Now your training will begin, Shin said and Naruto nodded before the spirit disappeared. Naruto turned to his shocked mother who still couldn't get over it. Her son was the summoner to the Shinigami. The thought itself was scary enough. Kushina walked up to her son and looked at him. You're just full of surprises, Kushina said and Naruto looked at the ground. He sheathed his sword like he was almost disappointed in himself for doing this in front of his mother. You aren't mad at me? Naruto asked. The last thing he wanted was for his mother to reject him also because of another scary power that came to him. His reply was Kushina bringing him into a tight hug making the blonde gasp. How could I be mad at my son? I was a little worried about you, but you handled everything perfectly. Never think I hate you, Naru-kun. You're my son after all. Your kenjutsu could use some work, but you did it, Kushina said and Naruto wrapped his arms around his mother. Cough cough, are we having a moment? Jiraiya said shocking the two. He had two tied up people inside. He never thought they'd be that easy. They were supposed to be A-ranked missing nin, but as Jiraiya had found out they were only lying so no one would get in their way. Bunch of idiots, no wonder Jiraiya took them down so fast. Was that it? I mean we're done right? Naruto asked and Jiraiya nodded while rubbing the back of his head. Well, let's just be happy that we got through everything without a hitch. I saw Naruto's clones rescue the daimyo. He's outside at the moment, so let's take these two to him and he'll decide what happens, Jiraiya said and the two Uzumaki nodded and went to the daimyo. They saw the man out in his lawn and came to him. Here you go, daimyo-sama. It didn't take long as we thought it would. They were just some shinobi bandits all around Chunin level. Here are the two leaders of the assault, Jiraiya said and the daimyo got up. Thank you, Jiraiya-sama. I'll go inform Hokage-sama of this success when I send a messenger to Konoha, the daimyo said making Jiraiya, Kushina and Naruto bow with their thanks as they left. So what now? Naruto asked making Jiraiya scoff. I'm going to bed. You can do whatever you want, brat, Jiraiya replied heading for the hotel. Meanwhile Kushina and Naruto stayed out in the streets just watching the old sage retire to his room. Anything you want to do, Ka-san? Naruto asked and Kushina shrugged her shoulders. She then yawned and Naruto grinned. I guess it's late. Let's go to bed, Naruto said and opened the door. Kushina followed him and the night was laid away by the group of three and them completing their first mission together. Next morning. Come on, Naru-kun. Your kenjutsu is good, but it still leaves room for improvement, Kushina said and Naruto sighed for like the 10th time since they woke up. This just wasn't fair at all. Jiraiya had gone off somewhere while Kushina and Naruto continued with the blonde's lesson in kenjutsu and taijutsu. Ka-san, you're not fair at all, Naruto said laying on the ground. Kushina giggled a little more while the sweat dropped of Naruto's face. Kushina laid next to Naruto and watched him relax from her training. She could only imagine him in the next few years. He'd be quite the man when she was done with him. It was then that Kushina smelled something and her nose pinpointed it to Naruto. She was smelling her son's sweat from their training. He had a weird smell to his body, but it was intoxicating to her. The red-headed habanero caught herself and stood to her feet. What was she doing? She couldn't be acting like this. Naruto turned to see his mother looking weird and raised an eyebrow. Ka-san, are you alright? Naruto asked and Kushina slightly jumped from his question. Yes, Naruto, I'm fine. Why do you ask? Kushina countered and Naruto narrowed his eyes. Well, you breathing heavily and you didn't call me. Never mind, Naruto said as he whistled away. Kushina glared at her son for a bit before she sighed. Sorry, I'm probably just thinking too much, she replied, and Naruto seemed to accept that for the moment. Naruto then just laid in the plains and sighed. Ka-san, I'm glad you're back, Naruto said, and Kushina wondered what brought that one, but she didn't complain about it at all. Despite her thinking, she hugged Naruto, making the blonde widen his eyes. Well, we have you to thank for that. Trust me, Naruto-kun, I'm not going anywhere, Kushina said, and Naruto knew that she wasn't lying. She was too much of a woman to do that. Thank you, Ka-san. When we go back to Konoha, what are you going to do? Naruto asked her, and Kushina put the tip of her finger before smiling. Oh, I'm gonna pay a visit to Tsunade. Get some explanations and maybe get you to our house in Konoha, which I told them you should get, but apparently no one listened, Kushina said with a dark chuckle. Naruto gulped before Kushina stood to her feet. Well, Sochi, come on. We've got 2 years to make this work, and I'm gonna teach you until you can't move, Kushina said, and Naruto sighed. That was his mother, and he wasn't complaining. 2 years later. Sigh. How long am I gonna be writing these damn documents? I swear this job doesn't get any easier, Tsunade said, slumping her shoulders. It was then that Shizune came through the door with a smile. Today's the day, isn't it, Tsunade-sama? Shizune asked, and Tsunade grinned. She looked out the window and off into the distance. Time for that brat to come home. That's right. My stress is totally going to increase, but I don't understand this note that Jiraiya sent me, Tsunade said, giving it to Shizune to read. To Tsunade. Tsunade, Haim, I'm glad I got to you. We're arriving to Konoha soon, and I just want to tell you one thing. Run. She's coming. Get out of there now. This is the bad day to be you. I got my beating, now it's your turn, but run. Jiraiya. Shizune looked at the note and raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you're in danger, Shizune said, while Tsunade scoffed. Like anything could be dangerous to me. Did you forget who I am? Tsunade asked, while Shizune shook her head at her master. She was still gonna be weary of this note just in case. Well, anyway, I guess it's time to go, Tsunade said, getting up from her seat and walking for the door. That's right. We can't keep them waiting, can we? Shizune asked as she left also. Near Konoha, 3 people were walking towards Konoha. One was the more recognizable Jiraiya in his usual clothes. The next was a woman about 30 who was wearing a long-sleeve blouse with a t-shirt under it. Her hair was red and slid down her slender form. It was Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto's mother, and speaking of the blonde Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He was now taller, with his blonde hair showing 2 small bangs on the side of his face. He was wearing a black obi shirt and black pants. On his arm were small black guards that covered that portion of his arm and the seal over his hand. It was all complete with an orange sash that was wrapped around his waist and some black shoes. On his right was his sword that he had used for those 2 years. Finally back. Man, this place hasn't changed at all, Naruto said as they came up to the village gates. The 2 gate guards Izumo and Kotetsu looked up and smiled. Hey, isn't that? Izumo started, but didn't finish as he got a nod from his buddy Kotetsu. That's right, but who's the woman with him? Kotetsu asked, but Izumo shook his head. It really hasn't changed at all. Well, except for the Hokage faces, but that's to be expected, right, Naru-kun? Kushina asked, getting a nod from Naruto as they walked through the village. With Sakura. Sakura continued to walk through the village on a supply check for Tsunade and went about her way until she saw her master and Shizune walking towards the village gates. Tsunade-sama, Shizune-san, where are you going? Sakura asked, making Tsunade and Shizune gasp at her, which in turn made Sakura raise an eyebrow. What did I say? Sakura asked, and Shizune giggled while Tsunade shook her head. Don't you know what today is? Tsunade asked, and Sakura narrowed her eyes. She thought it over for a second, and after some though she widened her eyes in realization before slumping her shoulders. How could I forget that? Is he here yet? Sakura asked, and Tsunade grinned like mad while shrugging her shoulders. Not sure, but he'll be here soon, Tsunade said, and she, Shizune, and Sakura walked off towards the gates of Konoha. With Naruto, the group of 3 continued to walk the trees as Naruto took in the sights. He saw nothing had changed at all since he was last here. Hey, look, it's boss, someone said, and Naruto turned around to see Konohamaru and his group right along with Tsunade, Shizune, and Sakura. Hey Konohamaru, How you been? Naruto asked as he ruffled his hair. Konohamaru grinned as he hugged his rival. I've been good, he responded, making Naruto smile. Hey brat, you've grown up. Not to mention your fashion sense has really improved, Tsunade said while Naruto grinned like mad. He brushed a hand through his hair and smiled. Well, I thought it deserved a change, Naruto said, making Tsunade nod. It was then that they heard chuckling, which made Naruto and Jiraiya gulp. Tsunade turned to the woman next to Naruto and widened her eyes. Finally. I finally get to see you. How have you been, Tsunade? Please come over here so I can talk with you about something, Kushina said, sharpening her blade while Tsunade backed away. Shizune gasped while Sakura raised an eyebrow. Who's this? And why is she holding her sword like that? Sakura asked while everyone backed away from the ki that was penetrating the air, making it thick. 2 years. I've waited for 2 years to see you, Tsunade, and I just want to catch up, right? Kushina asked while Tsunade turned to Jiraiya, who simply bowed to her and wished her luck. But how? Why you should be dead? Well, that's an interesting story for another time. Now then, you with the pink hair, please move right now, Kushina said, advancing on Tsunade while Sakura got a tick mark. Hey listen, you can't talk to Tsunade-sama like that, Sakura said while Tsunade, Jiraiya, Naruto and Shizune were mentally yelling for Sakura to shut her trap for once. Kushina turned to Sakura, who steeled her gaze at the redhead, narrowed her eyes. Sakura-chan, maybe you should get out of the way now, Naruto said while Sakura gazed over at him. Shut it, Naruto baka. I don't need your advice to handle this, Sakura said, and the air just got colder around her. Kushina chuckled even more as she found a secondary target. You're Sakura, aren't you? Kushina asked, and Sakura nodded, still locking eyes with the woman. That's right, she said while Kushina took a deep breath and cracked her neck. Okay, that's all I wanted to know, Kushina said as she unsheathed her sword. The entire village watched the two square off, and Kushina smiled. Then I'll have to tell you this. In my presence, don't call my son an idiot, and if you ever hit him again like I've been told, then I'll kill you, Kushina said in the simplest tone, which made Sakura gulp, and she realized that her life was in danger. Now then, as I was saying, Tsunade, tell me why you didn't tell Naruto about his heritage, and tell me why he's not living at our house like I told you and Sarutobi, and tell me why you didn't help raise him like you and Jiraiya said you would. Kushina said while Tsunade backed away. She turned to Shizune for help, but she was on the other side of the road, and Tsunade gasped before turning back. And now KK Kushina, I don't know how you're back, but let's see, calm down and talk this out, okay? Tsunade asked while Kushina stopped walking. I just met you, but the time for talk is over. Now is the time for punishment. Jiraiya received his and now you will receive yours. You can run, but I will catch you, Kushina said, and on that note Tsunade added chakra to her feet and jumped off, but she was quickly brought back by a chain attached to her leg as it slowly pulled her back. See, I said you could run, but now you're so kind as to stay. How noble of you, Tsunade. Now then, please let's go somewhere and talk, Kushina said as she walked away and into a small alleyway. Tsunade's teeth chattered against each other as she was dragged away. Shizune, help me, Tsunade yelled out, but Shizune gulped and bowed. Forgive me, Tsunade-sama, Shizune said quietly as the small darkness overwhelmed the alleyway. Ah, Tsunade yelled, making the entire village shiver. Naruto, who is that woman? Sakura asked, trying to stop her body from shaking while Naruto sighed and rubbed the back of his head along with Shizune and Jiraiya, who were praying to Kami for Tsunade's safety. She's my mother. Kushina Uzumaki, or the Red Death of Konoha, Naruto said, and Sakura widened her eyes. She's way out of my league, Sakura thought as the various screams of Tsunade filled the village. Yep, Naruto was back in Konoha and he brought a big surprise to them. Tsunade sat behind her desk rubbing her forehead of the giant lump on her head while standing behind her desk was Sakura with a smaller lump, Jiraiya and Naruto along with Shizune. Well, that was a nice talk, right, Tsunade? Kushina asked, and Tsunade cried a little more. She had to hate her life right now. This just so wasn't fair. Tsunade turned to Naruto and narrowed her eyes at the blonde. It's just one headache after another with you. You aren't even back for 10 minutes and I want you to leave again, Tsunade thought before finally deciding to talk. She really wanted to get off that little nightmare she had a few minutes ago. Well, that aside, in the complete shock of seeing Kushina, I guess it's good to see you, brat, Tsunade said, and Naruto nodded in agreement with her. He was more than happy to see his village again. It's good to see you too, Ba-chan, Naruto responded, and Tsunade grew a tick mark on her herd. It seems he still couldn't give her the respect she wanted, but somewhere in her heart she was happy that he hadn't changed in the least over those years. Well, his attire was an improvement. He really looked quite capable in that entire black outfit. So I hope you haven't been wasting his time, Jiraiya, Tsunade said, which made the Toad Sage scoff at his old teammate. Please, do you really think so low of me, Tsunade? The brat knows more than a thing or two, Jiraiya said, and in all honesty he wasn't kidding. He knew that if Naruto would fight someone, then it would be quite a shock of what the blonde could do. After all, he was trained under Kushina and himself, so it had to really count for something. That's right, Ba-chan. I've gotten wicked strong. I might even be able to take you on, Naruto said, making Kushina giggle while Tsunade and Sakura rolled their eyes. They could see that the blonde was still confident as ever. Yes, well, it's really good to see you confident. So Jiraiya, what rank should we give Naruto? I don't know how well he's improved, and keeping him a genin doesn't seem right, so what do you suggest we do? Tsunade asked, and the sage thought it over before turning to see Sakura and Naruto looking at him. Yeah, that could work. Well, it's important to have teamwork, so why don't you have Naruto and Sakura fight against one of your jonin? Jiraiya asked, and Tsunade's grin got bigger before she closed her eyes. I see. Well, I guess our volunteer was listening in, Tsunade said, and immediately there was a knock on the door. Everyone turned around to see Shikamaru and Temari come through the door, and it took the Nara a bit of time to recognize the blonde in front of him. Hey, you're Naruto. Man, it's good to see you. How have you been? Shikamaru asked, and Naruto smirked as he walked towards the next Nara clan head. I've been good, Shikamaru. How have you been? Still lazy? Naruto asked, and Shikamaru rubbed the back of his head with a sigh. Hey, this job is troublesome and I still don't like it. I'd rather be watching the clouds, Shikamaru said, making everyone in the room sweat drop. To Kushina, it only reminded her remembering how Yoshino was with most lazy boys. It was then that Shikamaru pointed to Temari. And I'm sure you remember this person, Shikamaru said, and Naruto turned to her. The blonde grinned and nodded. Only one girl I know has that hairstyle, right, Temari? Naruto asked, making Temari smile at the blonde. He really did change from the weird kid she remembered back during the Chunin exams. It's good to see you too, Naruto. It really shows that you've changed if you remember me, Temari said, and soon everyone heard the sound of some clap and turned to see Tsunade. I'll leave the greetings for later. Right now the person you want to fight is expecting you, Tsunade said, and Naruto nodded. Then tell Kakashi-sensei that I'm ready to have some fun when he comes in, Naruto said, making Tsunade widen her eyes. That only served to make Kushina giggle. She hadn't only been teaching Kenjutsu to Naruto, and she could hardly wait to see him fight with all she showed him. How did you know that? Tsunade asked, and Naruto grinned while Sakura looked at him like he just grew a second head. I told you I got stronger. So why don't you send him inside? Naruto asked, and Tsunade waved her hand. Soon Kakashi came inside just like Naruto thought, and while his gaze was apathetic he still held a small amount of surprise, but then he looked to see the redhead across from Naruto, and Kakashi gasped so much that it made him drop his precious book. Why you're, but how are you even? It's impossible, Kakashi said, making Kushina giggle. It's a real interesting story. It's something Naru-kun should tell you, not me, Kushina said, and suddenly Naruto felt everyone stare at him with all intent on knowing what the blonde did while Naruto glared at his mother. Ka-san, that's not funny, Naruto said while Kushina just kept her amused grin on her face. However, it didn't take long for Kakashi to turn to Naruto and picked up his book. Well, you are different. Well then, are you any good? Kakashi asked, and Naruto smiled. I sure am, Dadbayo. Oh, but before we get into it, I thought you'd might like a gift. I have no need for it, and even if I did then my mother would beat me to a pulp. So here you go, Naruto said, reaching into his pouches he took out a book and gave it to the Jonin. Kakashi widened his eyes as he cried tears of joy. It's not possible, Kakashi said as he felt like he was in the presence of Kami himself as he opened the book. While Jiraiya grinned. Yes, that's right. It is a work of art after all. No one could understand how magnificent it is, Jiraiya said, and Tsunade would have glared at him, but something worse was watching him. Jiraiya, why does my Naru-kun have that book? Kushina asked, and the Toad Sage gulped before turning around to see Kushina just smiling, but anyone who knew Kushina also knew that this smile was a terrible thing. I don't know, Jiraiya said as Kushina grabbed his shoulder. Then let me tell you something outside right now, Kushina said as she dragged a screaming Jiraiya away while everyone sighed. Tsunade chose to ignore it and sighed again. Kakashi, that's enough, Tsunade said, and Kakashi closed the book just as easily as he opened it. Well then, I can't wait to see how you and Sakura still work together, Naruto, but you must be tired, so we'll give you a chance to rest, then we'll fight it out, Kakashi said, and Naruto rose an eyebrow. Huh, I'm fine. I've had plenty of rest and I'm ready to go, Naruto said, and Sakura nodded in agreement with him. Kakashi turned to them and raised an eyebrow. Nonsense, you should just rest for a bit. I'll see you later, Kakashi told them and immediately shunshined off while everyone tried to contemplate what happened. He seemed to be in a hurry, Shizune said, making the obvious known. Can't wait to read that book. Sigh. Well, I'm gonna go now, Shikamaru said as he and Tamari left the room, but not before seeing Kushina come back through the room, and on the floor was a beaten-up Jiraiya. Well, since Kakashi-sensei ran off, I guess you have the time then, I guess you have the time. So Naruto, do you want to look around the village? Sakura asked, but Naruto sighed. Sorry Sakura, but I've got some things to do. Like moving into my house, right Tsunade Bachan? Naruto asked, and Tsunade sighed. She nodded and took out a map. Sarutobi-sensei left instructions to where the house was, and you should. Tsunade, do you really think I wouldn't know where my own house is? Come on Sochi, let's get you settled in like you should have been, Kushina said, wrapping her body around Naruto's arm and dragging him off while Sakura glared. As a mother always that free-loving with her son? Sakura asked, and Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Jealous? Tsunade asked, and Sakura huffed and rolled her eyes. Not in the least Tsunade-sama, Sakura said to her master, which made Tsunade giggle at the thought of Sakura being jealous of Naruto's own mother. It was a strange concept to even think that. With Kushina and Naruto, Kushina continued to drag Naruto towards their house. The blonde noticed the vacant Uchiha compound as they passed it. He narrowed his eyes and sighed, but didn't dwell on it long. He had other responsibilities and Sasuke wasn't one of them at the moment. It took a little while, but Kushina took Naruto into the woods, and after a few minutes they both came up to a house. It wasn't very large, but it wasn't small either. It seems to be the perfect blend of normal and exquisite. Not over the top, but definitely not ordinary. It's nice, Ka-san. We even have a pond, Naruto said, and Kushina nodded. She came up to the house and it showed seals preventing anyone from going inside. I'd do it, but you should do it, Naru-kun. Bite your thumb and trace it over the seal, Kushina told him, and Naruto nodded. The blonde bit his thumb and traced it over the seal. The seal glowed and then faded. Quickly a large barrier appeared over the house and immediately vanished, allowing Naruto and Kushina their access to the house. Kushina opened the door and both walked inside. For Kushina there was a small air of deja vu for her. While Naruto walked around the house, he wondered how it was so clean when the house didn't allow anyone inside, but he'd figure that out later. He saw his mother looking around with a longing look, and the blonde frowned. Are you alright, Ka-san? Naruto asked, and Kushina gave a gentle smile. I'm alright. Just reminiscing is all, Kushina said, and before long she stared to give Naruto a grand tour of the entire place, which he should have known already, but it hardly mattered anymore. While Kushina showed him around, Naruto made a cage bunshin to pack the things in his old apartment and move them into his house. The clone nodded and left the room, leaving the mother and son alone. Well, everything seems to be in place. Nothing's changed at all. Well, Sochi, I guess I'll show you the rooms, Kushina said, and the blonde walked away with her. They walked up the stairs and came inside the master bedroom. The bed was really big, at least for two people to sleep comfortably. This should be your room now, Sochi. We have a guest room, so I'll just sleep there, Kushina said, and Naruto shook his head. No way, Ka-san, I can't let you do that. You should just stay in here with me, Naruto said, and Kushina raised an eyebrow. She gave a small hint of a blush, but didn't know why she was. Are you sure about that? Kushina asked and Naruto glared at her. I don't mind if you do. Besides, you slept with me for 2 years before this, so why should this be any different? Naruto asked and Kushina thought that over. She wasn't sure how to answer that. She mainly did that because she always loved to hug her son and she'd rather with her son that Jiraiya, since no place had beds for three, and truth be told she was kind of used to it. Well, I suppose it's alright. You can take that half and I'll take this half of the bed, Kushina said and Naruto nodded. They each sat on opposite ends of the bed and started to unseal their clothes and things to put away in the various shelves and drawers. So you're finally taking initiative after 2 years. How nice for you and slow. I thought you were never going to try anything, Kyuubi suddenly said and Naruto narrowed his eyes. I'm not trying anything. And what the hell do you mean by taking initiative? This is my mother, damn it. Naruto said and Kyuubi chuckled at his container, acting flustered. Please, brat, mother or not, she a woman and like any other woman she has needs, got that? As far as I'm concerned she's just related to you if nothing else. What are you so worried about? Kyuubi asked and Naruto sighed. He looked over his shoulder and gazed at his mother combing her hair. The blonde gulped as he now realized the consequences of his actions. He was just trying to be polite to his mother, but now it turns into something like this. With all his training with the Shinigami, the blonde hadn't the time to ever try and act on his small feelings for his mother. Somewhere he was happy for that, but in the deeper places of his mind he wasn't happy at all. He wasn't sure what he wanted from his mother, but he knew she wouldn't give it to him, or worse, that she would completely reject him, so Naruto kept it all to himself. He at least felt that was for the best. Great, Kyuubi. Now I have to think like this, Naruto said while Kyuubi rolled his eyes at his container. He really wished that the blonde wasn't so damn cheeky. Whatever, brat. Just don't go insane with the closeness or you're really gonna have something to worry about then, Kyuubi said and Naruto sighed. Naru-kun, did you hear me? Kushina suddenly asked and the blonde turned to his mother. I'm sorry, what happened, Ka-san? Naruto asked and Kushina began again with a slight worry on her face. I said that I'm going to cook us some lunch, so would you like anything? She asked and Naruto nodded since he was feeling hungry too. So on that note, Kushina got up from her side of the bed and walked away from the room, leaving Naruto inside. Great. She's totally gonna be worried about me now, Naruto said and Kyuubi chuckled at his container unfortunate acts. Sigh, great, now what do I do? Naruto wondered, but then his clone came back with a scroll for all his stuff and the blonde took it. He closed his eyes and concentrated. Kage Bunshin Jutsu, Naruto said in thought, and immediately 2 clones came out and started to put things away while Naruto walked down the stairs. The blonde walked out into the yard and took in the nice scenery for a bit. Well, I better get started, Naruto said, taking off his wrist guards, revealing the seal on his hand. He bit his thumb and traced blood over it. Kuchio's no Jutsu, Naruto yelled, and immediately Shin appeared behind the blonde and narrowed his eyes at his summoner. So you're ready to continue? The Shinigami asked and Naruto nodded. He took out his sword and took his mother's taijutsu stance. He quickly saw his sword glow in the same white light that he had seen so many times with its strange glow. The blonde gripped his sword and concentrated all his chakra into it. The sword glowed brighter, making Naruto shield his eyes while the Shinigami watched. Focus, Naruto-sama. Using spiritual fire requires a great deal on concentration, Shin said to the blonde. For those 2 years, he had taught Naruto how to become the human Shinigami that Shin said he would be. Naruto had learned many techniques that involved his sword thanks to Kushina and Shin. In terms of what Shin told him, then there was the one scroll that Shin gave Naruto that showed Naruto every technique he would need to learn in order to be a human Shinigami. Naruto had learned about 5 to 7 different techniques due to their difficulty, but he had a lot more to do. Naruto gritted his teeth as his sword shined even more. He huffed as before he dropped the sword and the glow immediately stopped. The blonde cursed and looked at his hands, which had small burns on them. Damn, that hurt, Naruto said while the Shinigami nodded. Spirit flames weren't a joke. They burned a lot more than regular fire, and while it wasn't as hot, it still hurt when it engulfed you just like any normal fire. Keep at it. You have to do it, Shin said and Naruto picked up his sword. He gripped it and allowed it to glow again. I'll get this down. I know I have to, Naruto said before dropping his sword again from the burning on his hands. Kuso. Naruto yelled out before he tried again. A few hours later, Sakura sighed as she stayed at the gate where they were supposed to meet up. She expected the lateness from Kakashi, but Naruto was a new one on her. He also seemed slightly distant. She had noticed that one time when he didn't call her, Sakura-chan, like he always did. It unnerved the pink-haired Kunoichi slightly that maybe Naruto had changed too much. Hey Sakura, someone yelled and the Kunoichi looked up to see Naruto walking towards her. His hands seemed slightly burned, but he bandaged them up just as fine. You're late and what happened to your hands? She asked and Naruto grinned before sheepishly rubbing the back of his head. It's nothing major. Is Kakashi-sensei not here yet? Naruto asked and Sakura shook her head. No he isn't, she responded and Naruto narrowed his eyes as he leaned on the gate. Meanwhile Sakura took in the blonde's appearance and could tell that he looked better in black than anything else. She would even say that he was good looking. Naruto on the other hand was thinking about how to perfect his sword techniques along with him trying to figure out the feelings for his mother that he tried to suppress over the years which was difficult due to Kyuubi's ramblings. Hey I'm just speaking the truth. Don't put this on me, Kyuubi responded while Naruto sighed in thought. Soon a poof made them jump as they turned around to face their sensei. Yo, Kakashi said while Naruto narrowed his eyes at his sensei. Keep that up Kakashi-sensei and one day it will be the biggest mistake of your life, Naruto said as he walked into the training ground, but what was weird was the fact that Naruto's eyes showed a small shimmer of death on Kakashi which made the Jonin mentally gulp. Behind some trees were Kushina, Jiraiya, Tsunade and Shizune who decided to watch them all fight. So do you think that Naruto can beat Kakashi? Tsunade asked and Kushina giggled. He's my son. Of course he can and I bet that he'll get him in the most unexpected way to any of you, Kushina said and with that everyone decided to pay attention and watch with interest what she was talking about. Naruto and Sakura stood across from Kakashi while the Jonin held up two bells. Naruto narrowed his eyes while Sakura smirked while putting on her gloves. Alright we're here. Now then rules are the same as last time. Come at me with the intent to kill or you won't get these bells, Kakashi said making Naruto and Sakura nod. The blonde sighed and cracked his knuckles. He couldn't wait for what he had planned for Kakashi. We know that already Dadbeo, Naruto said and Sakura nodded with him. Don't think little of us Kakashi-sensei or you're gonna get hurt, Sakura said making Kakashi give an eye smile. We'll see, Kakashi responded as he closed his eyes. The wind blowed around them all making their hair sway. Kakashi grabbed his headband and lifted it up. Now we'll make this a little harder, Kakashi said to them with Naruto and Sakura grinning like mad. Alright Kakashi, if we're going that far then I will too, Naruto said as he closed his eyes. Sakura raised an eyebrow and so did Kakashi while Kushina and Jiraiya grinned, but Tsunade and Shizune were confused. What's he doing? Tsunade asked while Kushina grinned. Don't worry about that and just watch, Kushina said as Naruto opened his eyes. They didn't change and there was no special feature about them, but the blonde smirked anyway while the air around him became cold. Naruto's ki instantly raised making Sakura gulp. Ready Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked as he grabbed his sword. His love to do this to people. It was known as the Shi no Shinsen, which was taught to him by the Shinigami over his 2-year training period. It was a technique that more or less didn't rely on ki, but enhanced it to the point of the person looking at it was almost staring at their own death. Naruto remembered his own experience with it also. Kakashi's body trembled before Naruto lessened the gaze a bit for him to at least breathe easily. Something wrong Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked before Kakashi snapped out of his stupor. He looked at Naruto and narrowed his eyes like his mind just registered the blonde as a full-on threat. No it's nothing. Begin, Kakashi said and Naruto quickly erased the distance between him and Kakashi leaving a trail of dust in his wake. Sakura widened her eyes and even Kakashi did also. I'm taking those bells, Naruto said as he aimed for a punch at Kakashi, but the Jonin somehow managed to block it as he sent a kick at Naruto's face, but the blonde only chuckled and in a flash of speed Naruto punched Kakashi making the Jonin skid back a few feet. Kushina and Jiraiya grinned while Shizune and Tsunade showed utter surprise. They didn't expect Kakashi to get hit so fast. Naruto cracked his knuckles and glared at Kakashi while the Jonin rubbed his side. "Here I come, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said as he blurred out of sight. Kakashi widened his eyes as Naruto appeared behind him. "He's so fast," Kakashi thought, and Naruto was in amazement as well. He never had such a chance to go this fast before. His mother's training was extreme, but it got the job done. Naruto tried to grab the bells, but Kakashi spun his body and quickly turned away from Naruto. It was then that he dodged another punch from a clone, making the Jonin gasp. When did he make a Kage Bunshin? Kakashi wondered as Naruto and his clone backflipped away from him. "Hey Sakura, don't you want a crack at Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto asked, which broke Sakura out of her stupor of watching the fight. She could barely see Naruto as it was so when the blonde called her she was surprised, but she could admire the blonde later. "Alright, here I come, Kakashi-sensei," Sakura said, but before she could move into action Kakashi disappeared, making Sakura curse. "Damn it, where'd he go?" Sakura wondered while Naruto chuckled. This would be so much fun after all. In Suna, two members wearing red cloaks were coming up to the village and both looked inside it. They narrowed their eyes and grinned as they appeared. "So this is where the Ikibi Jinchuriki lives, him," one with blonde hair said while the other spoke in a gruff voice. "That's right. Deidara, are you sure that what you have in that pouch is enough for him?" he asked while the other grinned before putting his hands in his pouch. "You don't need to worry about that, Sasori, my man, Deidara said while Sasori rolled his eyes. Deidara took some clay in his hands and threw it at the ground, creating a giant bird. Deidara jumped on the giant clay bird and flew into the air to infiltrate the sand village. Meanwhile, the Kage was in his office signing some documents before he turned and looked at the sky. He narrowed his eyes and instantly got up from his seat. It was then that his former sensei, Baki, came through the door. "Lord Kage, is everything alright?" Baki asked as the Kage stood to his feet. "It's fine. Baki, I'm going out for a bit," he said, and Baki bowed. "Yes, Gaara-sama," Baki said as Gaara walked out of the room, leaving his sensei in the dark about what was going to happen. Gaara grabbed his gourd and stepped out on the platform. He saw a strange bird in the air and narrowed his eyes when he saw someone jump down in front of him. "Infiltration success," Deidara said with a grin, but that was quickly shot down when he looked at Gaara. The Ikibi Jinchuriki glared at Deidara. "So I've been spotted, Deidara said while Gaara's sand started to swirl around in a frantic manner. "There are no birds like that in my desert," Gaara said while Deidara grinned. "I suppose not. Well then I'll just show you why art is an explosion," Deidara yelled out as the Kage of sand got ready for a fight. Back in Konoha, both Sakura and Naruto found Kakashi and were currently fighting the Jonin with everything they had, or at least Sakura was. Naruto still didn't use his sword and was in for a straight taijutsu fight with Kakashi. "Get back here, Kakashi-sensei, and fight," Naruto yelled out as he chased Kakashi. The Jonin grinned and threw a kunai at the blonde, making him dodge before his field of vision was shattered. Kakashi used that opportunity to dash off, but he didn't get far before Sakura nearly punched his face as she rocketed into the ground, causing a loud tremor while Kakashi's sweat dropped. "She really is like Tsunade-sama," Kakashi thought before he dodged a kick from Naruto. The blonde smiled and backflipped, which revealed a clone behind him that went for a time difference attack. Kakashi narrowed his eyes before countering the punch and kicking the clone in the stomach, making it dispel. Kakashi backed away from the two of his students and wiped his brow. "Well, that's good for both of you. Your taijutsu is excellent, but now for your next lesson. Ninjutsu," Kakashi said as he went through his hand signs. Sakura and Naruto narrowed their eyes as the Jonin finished. "Sakura, get back," Naruto said, and Sakura wasn't sure what the blonde was going to do, but Naruto was ready for something. The blonde did his own hand signs while the seal on his hand glowed slightly. Naruto grabbed his sword and it shined as Naruto charged at Kakashi. "Naruto, what are you doing?" Sakura yelled out while Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizune narrowed their eyes. "Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu," Kakashi yelled out, sending the blazing fireball at Naruto. The blonde grinned as his sword slammed into the fireball. The collision was intense as Sakura and Kakashi stared in awe of Naruto slashing through the fire. Naruto continued at Kakashi, surprising the Jonin before he backflipped away. His Sharingan was working overtime to analyze what just happened to his ninjutsu. Naruto's sword shined and the blonde turned to Kakashi. His gaze was cold, but still full of some warmth. Like it, Kakashi-sensei. I call that move Shin no Mai, Dance of Death. As you know, Kakashi-sensei, fire is a living, breathing thing. It spreads, it consumes, and like us, it dies. I just made my sword the cause of that is all, Naruto said as Kakashi narrowed his eyes. He tried to feel the chakra around Naruto's sword, but it felt indeterminable. He had never seen something like it before anywhere. Kushina, did you teach Naruto that? Jiraiya asked, but Kushina was just as confused as the Toad Sage. No, I didn't. Where he learned it I don't know, but it's awesome, Databane. Kushina said, getting excited by watching her son. Tsunade, Shizune and Jiraiya's sweat dropped at her excitement. Meanwhile, Sakura stared at Naruto while the blonde ran at Kakashi. The copy shinobi dodged a slash from the blonde, but Naruto pivoted his foot and planted it into Kakashi's side. Kakashi winced, but didn't dwell on it long before he rebounded and landed on his feet. Not bad, Naruto. You've grown, Kakashi said before he dodged a heavy punch from Sakura which caused a crater in the ground. Don't count me out yet, sensei, Sakura said with a grin on face. Naruto smirked at his teammate before he sighed and took his mother's stance. Well, since I have my sword out, I think I'll use it, Naruto said while Kakashi closed his eyes for a minute and smiled. They've both grown so much. Especially you, Naruto Uzumaki, Kakashi thought as he opened his eyes. Not bad for a good fight, Kakashi said before he saw two Naruto clones burst out of the trees as they charged him. Kakashi took more note of the blue sphere in their hands as the distance between him and them lessened. Udama Rasengan, the two Narutos yelled as they tried to slam the ball into Kakashi's body, but the Jonin dodged the Rasengan as he jumped into the air. What he didn't expect was Naruto to use his speed to appear above Kakashi as the blonde began to spin violently. Uzu no Fukusu, Dai Uzumaki Akari, Whirlpool Revenge, Great Maelstrom Rage, Naruto yelled, and Kakashi could have sworn that even with his Sharingan, but he was seeing water dance around Naruto with his sword before the blonde dashed for him in the air as they hit the ground, causing a bit explosion. Sakura covered her eyes before surveying the landscape. Kushina smiled at her son's accomplishment while the blonde appeared. He huffed with a smile on his face before he turned to see Kakashi on the water with a large slash through his flak jacket. Phew, that was close. If I had been a second off, he really wouldn't killed me with that move, Kakashi said to himself while he went through more hand signs that Sakura and Naruto couldn't make out. Suiden no Jutsu, Kakashi yelled out, creating a large water dragon and sent it at Sakura and Naruto. Both cursed as they jumped out of the way as water flooded the entire area. Naruto and Sakura narrowly escaped the water as they headed into the trees inside. It was a diversion. Kakashi had run off hiding and they had no way of finding him. Naruto huffed as he laid on the ground next to a tree. Well, Kakashi-sensei really does live up to his reputation, Naruto said, and Sakura had to agree with him. But how are we going to beat him? Even if you've improved in nearly everything, we still can't match him, Sakura said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. I can match him, Naruto said, and Sakura widened her eyes, but Naruto didn't leave her the time to be impressed. I just don't have the same experience that he does. If I did, then we could take him on easily, Naruto said while Sakura widened her eyes again. What training did Naruto do to become like this? So what do we do? Sakura asked, and Naruto smiled a bit. Well, let's see. My taijutsu is about equal to his thanks to my mother's training. He's better at using ninjutsu than any of us. He's smarter than Shikamaru. His sense of smell is better than Kiba's. He has the Sharingan and a lot more experience than we do. Frankly, the only thing we have more than him is your medical ninjutsu and my chakra reserves, Naruto assessed before Sakura pointed. What about your sword? Are you better than him at that? Sakura asked, and Naruto looked at his sword for a few minutes. Well, Ka-san told me that Kakashi-sensei did no Kenjutsu at one point. I'd say I'm better than him since we haven't seen him pick up a sword in who knows how long, Naruto said, and Sakura sighed. When you sound like that, it's like we can't win, Sakura told the blonde, but Naruto's grin got bigger. Now, I didn't say that, Sakura. I might have been a goofball when we were younger, but thanks to Ero Sennin and Ka-san I've learned a few things, Naruto said and whispered into Sakura's ear. The pink kunoichi widened her eyes before she stood to her feet and smiled at the blonde. Naruto, you really are the #1 hyperactive, knucklehead ninja, Sakura said and Naruto stood to his feet. He quickly sheathed his sword and patted Sakura on the shoulder. Let's go get those bells, Naruto said and Sakura nodded. Meanwhile those watching were very impressed with Naruto and Sakura. They've really learned a lot. Still think he's a genin? Jiraiya asked and Tsunade scoffed before turning to him. Genin. The brat could be Jonin if he had the experience down. Whether he gets the bells or not he's already the best Chunin by far, Tsunade said while Kushina shushed them. It's going to get good now Databane, Kushina said and everyone turned their attention back to the woods. Kakashi sighed as he rested near a tree. His outfit was worse for wear and he was tired. The Jonin had overused the Sharingan and he was losing chakra fast. He then went into his pouch, but shook his head. No I can't. It's not easy to read and stop them like last time, but I'm dying to see what it happens, Kakashi said as he sat in the forest. He stayed there for a few more minutes before he smelled Sakura and Naruto coming at him. Great. Looks like the fight's back on, Kakashi said as Naruto came out of the trees with Sakura right behind him. Naruto charged at Kakashi and tried to punch him, but Kakashi dodged the hit and tried to hit Naruto, but the blonde grabbed his fist and held it tight while Sakura held his other hand. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at why it was like this before Naruto grinned. You Kakashi-sensei, the boss liked to start cool and end things with a bang, the blonde said and Kakashi widened his eyes. Naruto. He wouldn't dare, Kakashi said before he heard a sound. Kai. Naruto yelled and a massive explosion came across the forest making Kushina smile while Jiraiya sighed. Tsunade would really have some work to do when it was all over. Naruto and Sakura walked up to a passed out Kakashi and smiled. This was a good day indeed. 1 hour later, Kakashi groaned and rubbed his head as he came to. He had a splitting headache and turned to see Naruto and Sakura grinning at him. Kakashi checked his side and saw that the bells were gone. Naruto and Sakura held the two and smiled. That's your defeat Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said and Sakura nodded with him. Naruto, that was a nice trick. To mask us with clones to get close to Kakashi-sensei then have them explode. That was amazing. I can't believe you thought of that on the spot, Sakura said and Naruto grinned while Kakashi slowly got up. Bakuden Bunshin, explosion clone. I never would have suspected that. Not since Itachi anyway, Kakashi said keeping the last part to himself. Well I can honestly tell you that it worked out quite well, Naruto said as the others joined in. Only cause I taught it to you Sochi and you performed it magnificently, Kushina said wrapping Naruto in a hug that made the blonde blush from his mother's touch while Tsunade and Shizune tended to everyone's wounds. So Kakashi, in your opinion how did they do? Tsunade asked while Kakashi looked from Naruto to Sakura and back. They performed very well. I can honestly see their growth. Sakura is very unique and Naruto was amazing. With experience these two will go far. I honestly think that Naruto should be Chunin mid-Jonin if he had the experience, Kakashi said and Tsunade nodded. It was just as she thought. Kushina was really training her son, but Tsunade, Kakashi and Jiraiya were still wondering how she was back and they would ask her or Naruto sometime, but now wasn't that time for that. Sakura, that was a marvelous job as my apprentice. You performed nicely and made me proud, Tsunade said and Sakura bowed with her thanks. While Tsunade turned to Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. You're still a brat, but I'm impressed with that fight. You really had been training for those 2 years. Now based on a lot of things that I've seen I know you're no genin. Heck, you're almost hardly a Chunin expect for the lack of experience so until you gain more I'd like to promote you from genin to Chunin as of today. Congratulations brat, Tsunade said and the blonde's eyes gleamed. He then jumped up and down while everyone else smiled at him. It was then that Kushina got a gleam in her eyes before she snaked her arm around Naruto's neck. It's time to celebrate Databane. We're all going out for ramen and Jiraiya's paying. Kushina yelled while Jiraiya widened his eyes and dropped his jaw. I'll attend that party, Tsunade said laughing as did everyone else in the field as Naruto looked at the starry sky. How was that Shin? Naruto asked as he walked off the field with everyone else. Meanwhile, the Shinigami made a small appearance as he watched Naruto and the others leave. Very interesting, Naruto-sama, but you still have a lot to learn. Still, I'm decently impressed, Shin said as he disappeared from view. Still, no one knew what happened in Suna nor how it would spread the name of Naruto Uzumaki around the entire world. Thanks for listening. In the next chapter. In the meantime, please leave a review, I would love to hear your feedback. Especially if it helps me improve the overall story.